Welcome, everybody, to the 2023 Media Studies in Production Master Showcase. Yay! I'm Jan Fernbeck, your host and director of the Master of Arts program in MSP. We're here to celebrate you and your culminating work in the program. And I'd like to introduce my co-host, Laura Zalia.
Hello, everyone. I'm Laura Zalia, Associate Professor of Instruction in Media Studies and Production. And we'd like to begin with some thank yous because so many people work together to make an event like this happen. So big thank yous to MSP Chair Matthew Lombard and Vice Chair Jack Klotz, Associate Dean of Graduate Programs Dr. Brian Creech, Graduate Office Director Nicole McKenna, all of the faculty who serve on MSPMA committees. We have a lot of thank yous. Dr. Adrian Shaw, co-teacher of the MA Project Workshop class, and everyone who helped arrange the studio space and filming, including Jack McCarthy, Steve Gazzardo, Ben Caratanudo, Angie McCluskey, Melanie Spiegel, Paige Hakowski, Lucas Janiza, and Professor Paul Gluck, and TUTV. Thank you to everyone who helped make this possible. Yay!
Yay! Students can complete their MSP Master of Arts experience in one of three ways: with a final project, a final thesis, or by taking comprehensive exams. Today, 16 MA students will present their work, including 5 master's theses, 2 comprehensive exams, and 9 creative projects. And those creative projects are in a range of forms, including podcasts, documentaries, creative videos, and mixed media creative works of various forms. So we're going to do the presentations first, and we'll follow that with Q&A. Hopefully we'll have plenty of time to do that this year. Lori.
All right, so our first presenter is Julia Scheffler, who will be presenting her thesis, Ephemeral Inscriptions, an Ethnographic Exploration of Philadelphia Graffiti Culture in the Digital Age.
Hi, everyone. Good morning. My name is Julia Scheffler, and I will be presenting my thesis research, which is titled Ephemeral Inscriptions, an Ethnographic Exploration of Philadelphia Graffiti in the Digital Age. And just to start, this piece is a tag that's actually 2 blocks north of here on North Park Ave. So just to start, my research questions guiding this ethnography, there's 3 main ones. The first being, how may graffiti be used as a form of transgressive, radical citizens media to challenge hegemony and elicit alternative imaginaries of resistance in urban public spaces? So that's a lot, but essentially asking, how can graffiti be used to challenge the infrastructures and the physical spaces, the materiality of the spaces that they exist in? The next being, how has the integration of social media to graffiti practice shifted the medium's cultural reception? So graffiti is historically been debated as a form of public destruction of property. It's illegal, but the use of social media has made it more popular. It's made the aesthetic more commodified and acceptable in our culture. So I was exploring how social media has been used both by practitioners of graffiti and just fans or people that enjoy the art to encourage the public reception of graffiti as a medium. And the third being, how has the local Philadelphia graffiti scene embraced Instagram to maintain community and social connection? So for my research, I specifically focused on Philadelphia graffiti writers. And through interviewing them, talked about how they use Instagram as a platform to meet other writers, but also to share their art, and how that impacts the entire nature of graffiti as an art form and as a radical citizens media. And then just to explain the pictures a little bit, the first one is, it's the wicked style of a graffiti tag, which is a native style to Philadelphia culture, so that style was invented here. It's known for being tall and very hard to read. That isn't found in places like New York, where a lot of people think graffiti is from, because graffiti in New York is found on trains, and you can't read that on a train going by. So that is what is recognized as the classic Philadelphia traditional style. The second photo, if you've been to any bar in Philadelphia, you've seen a bathroom covered head to toe in graffiti. But the sticker under the faucet, it's called the Anti-Flower Graffiti Movement. That is an artist that posts those flowers or those pictures all out the city, and they share them on Instagram. The third is just a screenshot of a digital archive of graffiti in Philadelphia. So the theory that guided my ethnography, starting with citizens' radical media as theorized by Clemencia Rodriguez, Klein's very own, that citizens' media really goes hand in hand with graffiti because it embodies the essence of citizens' media in that people that practice graffiti are using the resources that are native to them in order to disseminate their own mediated messages in their own spaces without any institutional influence. The next being from Sharon Hayes is the idea of structurally transformative versus structurally reproductive agency. So these are two forms of agency. The reproductive is agency that allows people to maintain and affirm existing hegemonic ideas, while transformative uses those ideas in order to challenge them. And then the next being from Walter Benjamin, his idea of the aura of an art piece. I used that to explain how the messaging of graffiti changes when it goes from the physical space when you're seeing it on the street to when you're seeing a picture or a print or a canvas of that same artwork in a digital space or in an art gallery, and how that shifts how that artwork is received by the community. The next from Michael Schudson, he is a sociologist. So that is, he presents 5 different dimensions in order to evaluate cultural symbols. So that theory was used to explore how graffiti is perceived as an art form versus something illegal, and how that gives artists agency and allows the medium to be transformative. Michel de Certeau, his idea of ways of using a physical space, that also contributes to the idea of citizens' media and how we use physical spaces in order to challenge the hegemonic ideas that are baked into the material structures. And finally, the ideas of Marlena Lim, her ideas of roots, routes, and routers. Those are the 3 components of contemporary social movements. So methodology, this was critical ethnography. So 3 previous researchers that informed my method were Dr. Soyini Madison, who explains what a critical ethnography is and why it's important to look at ethnography intersectionally and all the different factors that impact the community in which you are researching. Oh yeah, sorry. This is a quote. And then just some photos from my research. I think that's it. Oh yeah, just some key findings. I interviewed 3 main graffiti writers throughout Philadelphia, as well as spent time with them while they were practicing graffiti. And main things I took away from talking to them is the uniqueness of Philadelphia hand styles is what makes the culture so strong here. And that within the community, there is a lot of tension over whether they think they should be using social media or not. But they do find that it is useful in establishing community. But a lot of them do have concerns over the future of graffiti, especially in Philadelphia. Thank you, everyone.
Okay. Thank you so much, Julia. That was great. Up next, we have Andrea Rojas, who will present her creative video, Nicaragua, a story that spans generations. Take it away, Andrea.
Good morning. How are you? Okay. So for my project, I created a tiki-taki timeline that takes you through the history of Nicaragua. My timeline begins with the fall of the dictator Anastasio Somoza and ends with the current dictator Daniel Ortega. For my project, I interviewed 4 individuals, including myself, who witnessed or experienced the events on the timeline. Immigration is often a cause of various historical situations. It is a domino effect. It doesn't just happen. And in the terms of Nicaragua, I could have gone back all the way to colonization, but that would have been way too long for this. So I focused on the Cold War period, and from then on, you can still see the long-term effects of war and intervention in the region. And as a Nicaraguan immigrant, I have experienced discrimination from misinformed people and witnessed the misrepresentation and sensationalization of unauthorized migrants in the media. And I use the term unauthorized because the media often refers to immigrants as illegals. And a person cannot be illegal, an action can be illegal. And in calling people illegal, you are dehumanizing them. The main goal of my piece is to humanize people and to contextualize these stories, and hopefully anyone that watches this can walk away with more knowledge and more empathy towards people who are leaving dangerous situations and are searching for just safety. It's not always about money or anything like that. You just want safety for your family. And a little bit of context about the Tiki-Talkie platform. So it is a software that allows the user to interact with audio, images, video, and text. This platform works well for my project because I wanted to highlight cause and effect. So a cost would be mandatory military enlistment for teenagers, and the effect was families leaving the country. A lot of the young boys were put in the front lines, and families did not want their sons to die for a war that they did not believe in. It also helps the viewer visualize the events that led to migration, and both during the Cold War and today. So I will actually show you now. So the timeline in a second. Okay, so you can see in the bottom. Oh, you can just click the X. Yeah. So you can see in the bottom there's little dots that kind of show you various points in history that are significant. Additionally, you can also view the timeline in 3D. So you can scroll forwards and backwards. Yeah. So we can go back to the 2D because personally it kind of hurts my eyes a little bit. But it's there is an option, right? So now I will show you a snippet of one of the interviews. Yeah, it's very near and dear to my heart. My aunt was 12 years old when she migrated. Yeah, I got you. Short and simple.
And then that a
Okay, put the
person that was going
captions.
to come and pick my brothers up to bring us to the U.S. She told us that when the person came to tell, the people that we're staying with, that was Uncle Paul Nunez. Because apparently my Uncle Paul had spoke to my mother on the phone and said that he couldn't make it, but he was going to send somebody that he trusted to come pick us up. So the guy arrived with a young lady, and we got in the vehicle. We said thank you to the family, and we left. So once we got to a house of some kind, they told us that my mom and I will have to walk the border. And Mom said, wait a minute, where's my other kids going to happen to them? And the gentleman told my mother, they're going to pass with me and this lady, and they're going to be sleeping. So usually they don't ask for paperwork for kids that are sleeping, or just minors, basically. So that's what happened with my siblings. They passed the border sleeping. My mom and I walked the border. We left around midnight, if I remember correctly. And basically, it was a cold. We weren't dressed appropriately for the weather and no one said, hey, it's gonna be cold in Tijuana, like after midnight. So we had like t-shirts and shorts, and my mom had a pair of pants. So I was really freezing. We had one jacket, so we used.
So basically, that's just a snippet of one of my interviews. And spoiler alert, they did make it, but obviously, it is very tedious. And I think for my aunt and for many other immigrants, it takes a lot of courage to talk about crossing the border in an unconventional manner. So again, I just hope that through viewing this timeline, you can see that. People don't just up and leave just because. There is always a reason, and a lot of it is based in history, and yeah, that's about it. Thank you.
thank you so much, Andrea. That was amazing. Okay, so next we have Rebecca Sebring. I'm happy to introduce her. She's going to show us her documentary, Navigating Inequality from the Sidelines, a documentary about women in sports media. And Becky's documentary won the MSP Award for Best Graduate Creative Project. So congratulations, Becky. I should also add, sorry, Becky, I'm going to take a minute of your time. No, not a minute. Occasionally look at me and Laura here, so because we want to try to keep this within like a 5-minute presentation time. So thanks.
Right. Hi, everyone. As Jan said, my name is Rebecca Sebring, and this is the documentary that I worked on alongside Matt Fine and Jan, and as well as Dr. Elizabeth Taylor in School of Sport, Tourism, and Hospitality Management. So on the next slide, we'll watch the first 2 minutes of it, and then I'll talk a little bit more about the theories behind it. Okay, well, I'll talk a little bit more about the theories behind it while we get that loaded up. So on the Tides 2021 Sports Media Racial and Gender Report card, the Associated Press editors actually scored their 6th consecutive F for gender hiring. So that's kind of what illustrated the background of how vast that gap is between the difference in genders hiring in sports media. So I used critical theory first and foremost to talk about the reasons for why this might be behind it. We might have gotten it. All right, yeah. So the gap in misrepresentation between men and women hiring in sports media was expressed greatly in the interviews that I talked about as well. A lot of our interviewees expressed that they didn't see themselves in sports broadcast television as they were growing up. So they never really thought that it was something that they were able to do. So this creates kind of that male-dominated power structure within the industry. So with so many less women, it kind of promotes that portrait of women being less able or less credible as their male counterparts. Okay, yeah. So the second theory that I use to analyze it is feminist theory. So this idea of being viewed as less than kind of lends itself to those credibility assumptions that women don't know anything about sports, which again, through these interviews was such a big portion of it, that things that they've been told or things that they've kind of felt due to this kind of lack of female representation. So a lot of them have received comments or a lot of discrimination of like, oh, you don't know anything about sports, or you're just here to look pretty and to find a man. Okay.
Just because I'm a woman, people would always question, what did I know about sports?
I'd point to my parents and be like, see, here's one. And they're like, it's one. Like, what are you doing? Go be an engineer or a lawyer or a doctor.
You only got your job because you're pretty, or you're not pretty enough to have your job.
My favorite are the like small racial comments. Like, I don't want Beyonce giving me my sports.
A man could work 100%, a woman has to work 150%.
Who did you sleep with? Who's your dad in the industry? What school did you go to?
Are you just trying to find your husband?
Would never wear skirts or dresses.
Any top is gonna look tight when you have a chest. Like, that's what happens.
3 hours of nonstop TV. I am hungry, I am thirsty, I want to sit down, and the main thing that you took out of this was not my coverage, but my outfit and what I am wearing. Are you sending this to the men in this market? And the answer is overwhelmingly no, because of course not.
A lot of people can see themselves in a lot of different people. And if I can play a small role in being that for somebody, then I will consider my career a success. 30 years ago, when I was a kid watching TV, there were so few women on ESPN doing games. There were very few sideline reporters, and if they were men.
The Phillies have finally done what the Cardinals did long ago. They've built a ball club for their ballpark, another AstroTurf Palace, the Vet.
So I look back and I can count on one hand the number of women that I saw in sports.
All right. Thank you, Becky. Our next presenter is Michelle Maximova, who is presenting their thesis, Reading Indie Video Games, A Study of Queer Players. Hey, Michelle.
Hi, everyone. Thank you. So my thesis is about reading indie video games queerly by queer players, or I'm using queer here as a kind of interchangeable with LGBTQ plus umbrella. And my research question was first and foremost to, like, a more overall research goal was to find out whether the theory that we already have on like academic readings of indie video games are aligned with what players experience when they actually play in their casual lives, because as we all know, casual audiences might not be reading academic papers. It's a very kind of so I broke that down into research questions or sub-questions. First would be, do queer players read indie games queerly at all? And indie is independent, in case that's... So how do they define indie? Because that's a very vague term that even academics don't always define very uniformly. And finally, do players actually relate to those games more than other games? Assuming that maybe they feel that these games, because of their independent production, are somehow different and able to provide different experiences. So I surveyed people, gathering their demographic information and interest in an interview. Interviews were my main method. I talked to several people who all identified as queer and self-selected basically for this study. And I also did, as kind of a supplementary method, a discourse analysis of academic publications that talked about indie video games to help me define what it meant for both players and academics. So my theory is kind of large, maybe all over the place, but basically I relied a lot on game studies and queer game studies, obviously, because it's about games, and queer theory is often like intertwined with that in the context of my particular study. So I relied on Shaw, Ruber, Consalvo, and other kind of prominent authors in the field. I also looked into the history of representation in indie video games, because that's something that is often connected to how we talk about queer players in general and queer audiences. We usually talk about representation rather than like how production views affect perception. And finally, I also used the Catherine Tender's concentric media model, which says that there is like a mainstream center, then there's a periphery, and finally there's the there's the margins, and then finally there's the periphery. And like the further you are from the mainstream, the more likely you are less affected by like market forces, and you can produce content that is unusual or weird or queer. And also a part of my framework was that indie games, because of their small scale and small budget, can be considered like unimportant as well as audiences. And I wanted to like center on that like just because they're considered unimportant doesn't mean that we shouldn't care about that. We should actually study more and understand better, because it's a part of our society, and it's like it matters to me also, and it should matter to all of us, because diversity betters society. So I ended up interviewing 8 people. All of them had different backgrounds. They were from different places. Some were not even from the US. The age range was fairly big, I would say, but most people were somewhere in their 20s or early 30s. And even though they had different backgrounds, they had all similar interests in games, and they had similar responses to my questions, actually, which was very interesting to find out. Well, the main answer to my research question is that no, they did not relate to indie games as queer people, and they did not connect their identity with the mode of production, which kind of highlights this theoretical distance of what we have in academic theory and what we have in lived player experiences. But on the other hand, I found that those people connected by their mutual interests, but also all coming from different places, they all thought that storytelling was very important. And I am looking forward to researching more of that in the future, and I think it's very interesting to see how audiences can be united by things that we don't expect them to be united by. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Michelle. Next, I'm delighted to introduce Yiming Huang, who will discuss his comprehensive exams on semiotics and advertising, on multitasking, and on the impact of China's hegemony on Taiwanese media.
Good morning, everyone. I did not bring anything special here, but I think what I do for my comprehensive exams, they are all kind of, I think, matters to my daily life, because so for the first one, I do semiotics and advertising, because since I was little, I was always wondering how come they're putting this ad on TV, or why I'm seeing this. I'm not a niche. So in that topics, I kind of go through semiotics theory and discuss how myth and how messages kind of flow through advertising. So, advertisers, they are able to have a deeper connection with their niche, their target audience. And for the next one, I do multitasking, because today we kind of had a lot of sources of media consuming ways, and I don't know you guys, but I personally have done a lot of things during class. Just I scroll through social media. I watch sports game, and I kind of discuss that. I applied limited capacity model and multiple resource theory into that, and discuss the impact of multitasking and how we act out after and during multitasking. And for the last topic, I do China's hegemony and its impact on Taiwanese media. So yeah, I'm a Taiwanese, and our relationship with China is kind of like, everybody knows. And so being a Taiwanese, I always find out that hey, we are in a country which value freedom of speech, but sources from China, they are kind of like using this as a way to promote their political propaganda through our media, and through all kinds of ways, like social media, like news, or like invest in Taiwanese media companies so that they can do all of this for them. And I find it really interesting, because in the society back home, we are kind of like polarizing. Some of them wants to be independent country, or have always already seen us as a independent country, and some of them still, kinds of like, hey, we still have a roots there in mainland China, so how come we are kind of like same family, like we are the same race, we speak same language, and there's a lot of debate in Taiwan about that. So I kind of go through this in that topic and how this debate go through media. Yeah, that's pretty it. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Yiming. Up next is Amaris Manning, who will present her webcomic and audience analysis of that comic, Hellions Exploring the Representation of Black and Brown Male Characters Through a Webcomic.
Hello, everyone, and my name is Amaris Manning, and yes, I will be discussing my webcomic Hellions and exploring representation of Black and brown male characters through a webcomic. So, historically, racial representation has been fraught from stigmatized images and stereotype traits of Black and brown people through blackface and Hollywood portrayals, primarily men. And these traits being menacing and even exotic and hypersexualized depictions of Black and brown men have been an ongoing trend in U.S. media. And even as more Black and brown people had the ability to represent themselves, even in the 21st century. But the demand for more authenticity as we became more progressive from audiences of color later impacted how people, particularly men, were represented across different mediums in a new digital age where content consumption is limitless. And traditional mediums, such as like books and comics, are now reshaped and modified for the sake of convenience and giving us more access to different content that was within our interest. And I use digital media as an opportunity to explore representation of Black and brown males in U.S. comics, particularly webcomics. And through my webcomic Hellions on Webtoon, I assess how my target audience, which are readers 18 to 25 in the U.S., how they interact with the representation of the primary Black and brown male characters of the story. But to understand the reasoning for their responses, I use theoretical approaches of symbolic interactionism, looking glass self, social construction, and parasocial relationships to understand their reasoning for interaction, because all those theories intersect as parts of identity and perceptions of the world. So Webtoon is a free digital comic service that originated in South Korea and has become an international sensation for fans of manga and comics, such as myself, giving them endless access to a variety of manga and comics of different category genres. And Webtoon is available in China, Taiwan, Korea, Thailand, Japan, Indonesia, and the United States. But despite its global popularity, majority of its consumer demographics are Asian, which impacts the character representation and promotions of different stories based on the large-scale audience. So there are a small number of stories on Webtoon that feature predominantly Black and brown representation, even by independent creators like myself who are Black and brown. But as a creator, I wanted to challenge this by creating a story that would be different for the general audience and have them understand representation through narrative and character design. But I also wanted to understand the significance of representation of how the way the characters are represented impact the way the U.S. media speaks about our identities about race and masculinity in the U.S. So for my first assessment, I focused on the representation through character design. So I had a survey that was both qualitative and quantitative, consisting of multiple choice and open-ended responses, supplying feedback from the audience on the initial designs for the primary characters, Quentin, Antonio, and Marco. And I just want to note that Quentin is African-American and Samoan, Antonio is Brazilian Mexican-American, and Marco is African-American and Cuban, and all are male identifying. Antonio received the most praise for his initial design and very little critique, but Marco and Quentin, however, received heavy criticism based on their hair texture and facial features seeming more European-based initially. But after I posted the new designs of the characters, the audience was more receptive of their appearance, seeming more authentic, as one person, interestingly, who also identified as Pacific Islander, mentioned that the new design for Quentin embodied how they perceive themselves as a dark-skinned Pacific Islander, and how in U.S. media, Samoan men are typically portrayed as being lighter-skinned, having thinner noses, and wavy hair. For my second assessment within narrative, I did the same thing as the first one, but I assessed more so about the narrative, and they were also multiple choice and open-ended. But based on the responses, the participants in favor of the narrative believe that it showcased the harsh realities of Black and brown males within the U.S. in multiple areas, including mental health and sexual identity, in a biased heteronormative society. But critics, however, felt that some stereotypes were pushed by gang membership and how males being weak and not being as firm as their female counterparts were also mentioned. And one critic I do want to mention said that, Quentin in the 29th episode was referred to as weak, which depicted suggestions of sexual assault, which kind of spoke to the stigma about men being victims of sexual assault. All in all, the character representation is significant as audiences manage to build parasocial relationships with the characters from some familiarity about their lives and everything that they've experienced. But despite females being the predominant demographic of readers, followed by non-binary individuals and then males, the primary focus of Black and brown males opens a conversation about how creators who are not Black and brown or are Black and brown but not male identifying contribute to representation of masculinity within marginalized communities. And Webtoon is one of the many potential platforms that can be used by content creators to understand significance of character representation in entertainment, and as more traditional mediums become part of this digital age where content is easily acceptable and the content can reflect our values and ideas about the modern world and the people that it represents and within it. And those are my sources. So, yeah.
These projects and theses and comps are all so great. I'm enjoying seeing them. Thank you, Amaris. Let's see, next up we have, I'm happy to introduce Alexis Mignonia, who will present her thesis, When Art Becomes Advocacy, Music in the Me Too Movement.
Hi, everyone. I'm so happy to talk to you today about my thesis. And I just wanted to issue a brief content warning. So obviously, this is all rooted in the Me Too movement, and therefore conversations around sexual assault and violence will take place very briefly, specifically after the methodology section. So if that's not pertinent to your journey, feel free to do what works for you. So I just wanted to share a brief summary of my abstract to introduce. So basically through discourse analysis and historical analysis, I evaluated music in past social movements, specifically the 4 that you can see listed here. And using the music that was used in those movements as well as the lyrics, I used it as context to see how music is used in more modern movements, such as the Me Too movement. And it was very beneficial to see how music and lyrics, like I said, used in past social movements, how they ignite social change and therefore continue to up until this day. So the guiding questions for my research were twofold. How has music been used in past US socially disruptive movements, like I talked about? And how did music propel the Me Too movement forward? So again, using that historical use of music as context for Me Too. So the main 2 theories that I used were the social movement media theory as well as feminist theory. And the social movement media theory kind of talks about how social movements succeed, why they don't succeed, the systems and the media that support them, and some, branches of that theory that I included were, of course, my chair, Dr. Rodriguez's idea of citizens media, as well as Lim's routes, roots, and routers, as someone already touched on as well. Feminist theory really covers, again, Me Too, gender roles, how the treatment of the sexes influence, our identity, and how it's shaped and carried out into the world. So I wanted to give a brief overview of my lit review only because, like I said, there are particular music used in each movement that really speaks to that time and place. And so specifically for the abolitionist movement, we're talking about slave spirituals. For the civil rights movement, a lot of political music. You'll see a few examples as well. Anti-war, pro-labor movements of the 50s and 60s. That's a lot of folk music, that kind of stuff. Environmentalist music, lyrics. And the 4 waves of feminism, which of course were my focus, the 4th wave being Me Too, and each wave's foreshadow of Me Too. And the methodology used were basically historical analysis as well as discourse analysis. So again, you'll hear this a lot repeated throughout, but it's important to note, historical analysis relating to how those past social movements and their use of music are used as context and contextualize how music is used in modern movements, specifically Me Too. So to preserve time, I'll give a very brief overview of Me Too. Obviously, it's a very complex movement that is arguably still going on and going strong. But basically, it's a global social movement aimed at exposing and preventing sexual assault, harassment, and violence. It's been around for a while, and the phrase itself was coined by Tarana Burke back in 2006, but in the US and specifically in the media and entertainment industry, it didn't exactly take off, or it wasn't, let's say, ignited as much as it was around 2017 when sexual assault accusations against Hollywood producer Harvey Weinstein came to light. I'm sure we all remember this. It absolutely took over the internet and took over Twitter, particularly when Alyssa Milano made this tweet saying, if you've been sexually harassed or assaulted, write Me Too as a response to this tweet. And millions of people continue to reshare and retweet this. And it is important to note, so Weinstein has been convicted of a multitude of sexual crimes, including assault and rape. He's serving in several states. But the legacy of this event continues to spiral and unravel as we speak. So prominent songs to consider in the Me Too era, if you will. There's 4. Here are the first 2. So Mr. Weinstein Will See You Now. The major themes are despair, anger, resentment, hopelessness, solidarity, and accountability. And you might ask yourself, how can you wrap that all into a song? A song is either happy or sad. It's either hopeful or hopeless. But I encourage you to check out these lyrics, and specifically the modality of the lyrics, as well as the music itself, the chords used, the ethereal sounds. It's really fascinating to see how these 2 phenomenal women put together a very blunt song calling out Mr. Weinstein and the events that occurred. Lady Gaga was also a pretty prominent figure and still is a prominent figure for the Me Too movement, as well as sexual assault, rape awareness, all of that kind of stuff. And she released Till It Happens to You as a part of the Hunting Ground documentary, which talked about sexual assault and violence on US college campuses. Great documentary if you're interested in this topic. Themes of empathy, sadness, solidarity, and fear. Prayin' by Kesha. Kesha accused her former producer of sexual assault and violence, and through kind of the events that unraveled, she put out this song, which was about finding peace and forgiveness, and really just, like I said, hope, forgiveness, empathy, and peace. And finally, A Scary Time by Lindsay Lab. This was not necessarily released as part of a record group. This was actually on YouTube and went viral and was reshared and reshared. I thought it was important to really kind of highlight what people are saying and how people are creating their own music, that even if you're not Kesha or Lady Gaga, you too can put out really meaningful songs and really create change. And some themes from that song are rage, hopelessness, and sarcasm, as you can see in the lyrics. And so conclusions and future considerations, I think it's important to talk about how, Me Too is obviously a very unique movement. And like I said, it's continuing to unfold even to this day. But while Me Too may not have one distinct anthem or song, the movement is a product of the multimodality that defines our present moment. Social media campaigns, flash mobs, dances, women's marches, this is all really unique to the moment that we're living in. And music is just one component of this. And I think it's also important for future research to touch on how music is impacted by the overturn of Roe versus Wade this past summer. It's going to be really interesting to see, and we're already seeing a lot of artists and creators come forth and talk about how this attack on women's rights is really being played out into not only art, but society itself. And therefore, art being advocacy work, how that will kind of affect our ongoing moment. Thank you.
Thank you, Lexi. I'd like to introduce Andrea Ionis, who is presenting her film Daughters of Immigrants, How Coming-of-Age Women Traverse Bicultural Worlds in the United States.
Hi. Once again, my name is Andrea Ionis, and I created a documentary called Daughters of Immigrants, specifically focusing on how coming-of-age women traverse bicultural worlds, specifically here in the U.S. So who is featured in this film? I spoke to 5 women who are either friends of mine or acquaintances, 2 being Mexican American, 1 being Hmong American, 1 being Vietnamese American, and 1 being Indian American, specifically Bengali Indian American. Just to kind of give you like a brief overview of at least 3 of the participants, one of them, Mirangela Cervantes Juarez, she spoke specifically about her experience and how greatly it is tied to religion, and how religion is plays a big role in her experience as a daughter of immigrants, and her experience in understanding the world around her, specifically here in the U.S., and how Catholicism has a great history with colonialism, and specifically in Mexico, and how that affects her to this day. Stephanie King, she spoke specifically on her experience as a daughter of immigrant and woman specifically within the Hmong culture, being affected greatly by what had happened in the war in Vietnam, and in the Laos area. Her parents come from Laos, but are of Hmong ethnicity, and how the culture, with the effects of their cultural history, affects women, and how they are expected to be quiet, cook, clean, take care of family, and for her specifically, her experience is talking about taking care of her parents. Monica Dang, she specifically really wanted to talk about her experience being a daughter of immigrants, with the pressure of her immigrant parents putting everything on her to take care of the family, to be a good representation, to be the highest achieving, and specifically her experience with mental health being affected by all of these expectations put on her. So why do these stories matter? First and foremost, I'm also a daughter of immigrants and an immigrant myself, and I feel that my story greatly also ties to a lot of things that they talk about in their stories. The big obvious is that I am a white woman in the United States, and so my experience is going to be vastly different compared to their experience because of that one thing. But regardless, I thought that, my story, I feel like, is not as well understood and heard many times, and I can only imagine how much more so it is for them. So the main topics that I think are the most important, there's a lot of really important things in the project, obviously, but the 3 that I can maybe hopefully quickly talk about here for you guys is intersectionality, biculturalism, and hybridity, and just to kind of familiarize you with intersectionality. It was coined by Professor Kimberly Crenshaw, describing how race, class, gender, and other individual characteristics intersect with one another and overlap, as a very simplified explanation of it. Obviously, Kimberly Crenshaw is the person who blazed this, trailblazed this, but I also used a lot of Patricia Hill Collins' interaction with intersectionality within my paper, and it is also greatly seen throughout my film as well. One being, I have a participant who is Mexican American, but she is also indigenous Mayan. She is also undocumented, and she has, yes. I will move on. I won't keep adding to this. I have a tendency to talk a lot, so I'm gonna try to be brief with you guys. Biculturalism is another really important topic in this. Eric Schwimmer was the first person, one of the first people to talk about biculturalism within his writings. So the two people that I worked with a lot in my paper is Angela Nguyen and Veronica Bennett Martinez. They both talked a lot about biculturalism, and specifically for my project, biculturalism was really important because these women living in a bicultural world here in the United States, having a bicultural identity was very important, obviously, to touch on, being a hyphenated American. And then hybridity, my last slide, is just talking about mixed origins, specifically people who are either offsprings of dissimilar parentage or in the post-colonial context. Hybridity also talks about tensions, appropriations amongst colonizing forces and those who are colonized. I used a lot of Sweeney Madison's interactions with hybridity as well. And then it brings the idea of assimilation. Is assimilation a thing that is going to inevitably happen, or are people pushing back on assimilation because they are embracing their bicultural identity? And yeah, that's it.
Thank you, Andrea. Okay. And now we have for you Jamie Margella and her creative series Picture Perfect Podcast, the manipulation behind historically controversial brands and their impact on the body positivity movement. Take it away, Jamie.
It's okay. Surprise. Okay, so for my creative project, I conducted 3 interviews. You'll get little snippets of them in a minute, but I titled my project Picture Perfect because of the irony of what we're going to talk about. So let's go to the next slide first. This is my abstract. I'll read it to you. So Picture Perfect is a podcast series of mini episodes that discusses how the marketing efforts of popular clothing brands have impacted young women and exacerbated their body image issues. This podcast consists of interviews with scholars and activists who critique the industry and its toxic and exclusive standards of the thin, idealized body. That's a very important term that we're going to talk about. The research compares behaviors from 3 popular clothing brands, Aerie, Abercrombie & Fitch, and Victoria's Secret, and analyzes how their practices differ. Other topics include the impact of social media and how the company's portrayals of beauty affect women's body image. And then in a time of progressive change, ideas of diversity, equity, and inclusion have dominated this conversation around the representation in this industry. So the podcast is building on the conversation by amplifying women on the cutting edge of the social justice movement that is body positivity. That being said, I have a few snippets. First is Big Moves. Can you hear me okay? Jessica Judd and Matilda St. John. So Big Moves is a dance organization in San Francisco, California, that focuses on fat liberation. A lot of their work is reclaiming the word fat to not attach shame to the word anymore and to really celebrate who they are. So the first voice you hear is Matilda, and then Jessica adds on in the last few seconds.
I think that people want to be seen as being on the right side of this issue and then don't actually want to do much about the structural work to change. Okay, if this is the average size of the American woman, you're saying like 12, 14, sometimes, you know, in femme clothes, I've also heard like 18, 20 as being somewhere in the middle. What does that mean? That the vast majority of what we have in here is not going to fit the vast majority of people.
They understand there's an issue. They understand that it's not cool to say it's for thin people only, but you have to do structural work to change those things.
That interview was in total about an hour and a half. So the full episode of what I cut down got to be like 30 minutes, which was very difficult, but we talked about a lot of really awesome, really important things. So when those are uploaded, I'll share links to them. So next we have Dr. Celine LeBeouf, who's a Harvard scholar that I have to give a great shout out to Ose for helping me find her. She was so awesome. She talked about feminist philosophy, race, intersectionality. So we talk, I believe this one is about the male gaze, I think.
One thing about body positivity these days is that there's a question of whether fashion companies are capitalizing on body positivity and being, for example, more size inclusive when, is it just to sell more products, or do they have like some sort of genuine interest in broadening their market base? So I think in terms of the evolution, there's just the fact that we have to live up to this standard or that standard. There's always a shift and you're never quite enough.
Okay, so that was not the male gaze. We do talk about that. However, this is just about the movement and the direction that it's going, and whether these brands doing these rebranding efforts and trying to be more inclusive, are they really genuine, or is it really just a marketing ploy? So last but not least is Dr. Casey Wendels, who's an advertising professor in Florida, and we talk about the different standards of like who the American woman is, but like who do we see in the media, like who the models are, and the thin idealized body.
General consensus around the research is that when we are exposed to media, we're heavily exposed to the thin ideal. And so the people that we see in the media are very thin, they're very tall. I think the comparison is the average American woman is 5'4" and 140 pounds, and the average model is 5'11" and 117 pounds. Those are two very different demographic groups. For the media, we get exposed to this thin ideal. And then what happens is that we make that comparison of how am I the same or different than that person? And what it leads to is for women to feel dissatisfied.
I think that's everything. This is just where I got their pictures from, and that's it.
All right, thank you, Jamie. Next up is Bryn Garrick, presenting her thesis, Real Beauty with Real Bodies, the Body Positivity Movement and Increased Cynicism Towards Dove's Commodification of Feminism. And in introducing Bryn, I would also like to say congratulations. Ms. Bryn is the winner of the MSP Award for First Place Graduate Research Paper. Congratulations.
All right, so my thesis is Real Beauty with Real Bodies. And so for this, I looked at Dove's Real Beauty campaign, which is a campaign that ran from 2004 to present day. This campaign focused on real beauty and body positivity rather than the typical beauty standards that Jamie just discussed. And I specifically looked at their shift to the Self-Esteem Project in 2019, which focused on a younger demographic. So to do this, I looked through critical feminist theory, which examines the institutionalized systems that perpetuate discrepancies among men and women. Specifically, I looked at the last two waves of feminism, where the third wave is women's power as a collective over the patriarchy, and the fourth wave is individualism over the patriarchy. And then I also looked at consumerism within feminism with Bené Weiser's economies of visibility, with the market of empowerment, which basically encourages women in order to sell a product, and the market of protection, which discourages women in order to sell a product. My research question was, how has the public's reaction to Dove's Real Beauty and Dove's Self-Esteem Project videos changed following the incorporation of youth into body positivity messaging? So I did this through an inductive content analysis where I scraped YouTube comments from all Dove US YouTube videos that mentioned Real Beauty or the Self-Esteem Project in the description, title, or video. And then because I wanted to measure the change over time, I divided all the videos into 2-year categories, so like 2013, 2014, etc., and pulled 200 comments randomly from each time period, making up my random sample of 1,000 comments. And then I color-coded these comments into themes. There were 5 overarching themes. One was the overall sentiment towards the campaign, either positive or negative. One was a discussion around how beauty is not an important part of someone's person. Another one discussed the overall sentiment towards Dove as a corporation. One discussed the inclusivity of people in the videos. And then the last one was blame and were comments suggesting who or what is to blame for body image issues. So my major findings were the increased cynicism towards corporations, specifically with Dove. People questioned their motives and found it disingenuous. And then with social media companies, people were blaming the social media corporations for encouraging harmful beauty standards towards young women. There was also an increased discussion for intersectionality. So there was specifically a increase in discussion of men and their experience within the body positivity movement, as well as race-based hair discrimination and how women of color face other issues than white women. So my major findings said that. So critical feminist theory can help to explain the cynicism as the fourth wave feminist movement drew more attention to corporations. As the project shifted to the self-esteem project, it shifted more to a market of protection, which discourages women, which is seen negatively by the public. And then with the intersectionality finding, this also connects to fourth wave feminism, as there was an increased discrepancies between men and women based on characteristics as they discussed the individualism of people. So.
Thanks, Bryn. Okay, next, I'd like to introduce Rachel Bromberg, who will present her multimedia creative work, Figures Fashion Show. It's all you, Rachel.
Hey. I'm more nervous standing in front of 30 really smart people than I was in front of 100 people at this show. So, yeah, it was called Figures Fashion Show, and it was March 12th, and it was at a women-owned business, location 215 Studio, and I've worked with this woman for several years, and she gave me a lot of inspiration and let me use the studio for this project. So shout out to them and her. Press this button. So I am gonna just go back. So the tagline for this was that women have the right to wear whatever they want, which means women can claim or reclaim garments if we see them as suitable for our figures. Now, I took this from personal perspective of what I wear and comfortability, and I used shapewear as the object of interest and what I looked into, because shapewear and corset wear is a physical constricting device, and it also has demonstrated it socially and acceptably for women's bodies. So a lot of the research is from there. And I'm just gonna, I'll talk about the multi-part of my project. So I started by interviewing multiple models, 2 of them who actually walked in the show and are Temple alumni as well. And I created an introduction video out of a photo shoot that I had with all of the models that I cast. And from the interview, I created an audio portion, which I took from the interview, and I put lyrics together almost, and I did moods, kind of with how they feel about what they're wearing, corsetry, and the male gaze. And that audio ended up being the full audio piece for the show itself. So it's a little repetitive. It was like a 15-minute loop. And I took from the audio piece, I feel like I look good in. It's just part of the quote, you'll hear it. And then I had the whole fashion show itself. So this was quite a few things all put together. And I will show you the video. No, yeah, I think you just click it. It'll link out, yeah. Can you go to 1930, Mel? Visually dominant. Yeah, so that was a part. One of the designers had a few outfits that I wanted to show from the show, and a lot of it was like painting on garments, just like you know, stuff about body positivity. And then I forgot I'm in charge over here. So I talk about in my paper, and it's a complex relationship with women's bodies and this undergarment. And the historical background, of course, is discussed and how it has grown in popularity and how it has adapted. And I use feminist movements and feminist theory and like what the garment has demonstrated. So like, for instance, one is like flappers were seen as a sign of empowerment or liberation to break free from societal norms, which is also happening now with the body positivity movement. And so Figure's fashion show is to empower women to wear any garment, and I look at how flexible feminism allows that to happen because it is a more adaptable and inclusive approach and recognizes diverse experiences and challenges that women face from different backgrounds, shapes, and sizes. So with that, you are all beautiful and wear whatever you want.
All right, thank you, Rachel. Now it is my pleasure to introduce Dylan Schenker. Dylan will present his thesis, The Construction of Identity and Evolution of Desire Through Synthetic Media.
Okay, just a quick preface. I think something that was edifying about being in this program is that I don't think I'm a media scholar the same way a lot of the people in this program are. I mostly just philosophize. I don't really so this is very philosophy heavy, and my brain is kind of permanently scarred by French philosophy, so. Did I do it? Wait. Oh, I've never used one of these before. Okay. Content warning, I'm going to be talking about very kind of like sexually suggestive and material. Some of it pornographic. There will be some disturbing images, but because this is going to be posted on YouTube, I had to kind of like dial back what images I would include, but hopefully they're still provocative. Synthetic media, any media that's manipulated in some way through either manually or through artificial intelligence. Less technical means of synthetic media include deceptive editing, slowing down or speeding up a footage, restaging or recontextualizing a footage to change the meaning more broadly and for the purposes of this research. This could also include the use of social media filters and skins or editing tools that change a person's appearance in any way. Deepfakes, kind of like the main focus, if you don't know, they're a form of audiovisual manipulation enabled through machine learning in which an individual is made to do or say something they never did or said. Often entails the insertion of someone's likeness into a video by grafting their face onto another body. Large sets of photos and videos are collected so an artificial intelligence can model what a particular face looks like with different expressions and from various angles. This is kind of an example of, if you've never seen a deepfake before, of how they work. So despite the accompanying example, it's usually used primarily to make porn, and it's usually known as involuntary porn in terms of like they take people's a woman's likeness and they'll kind of insert it into a pornographic video. Usually it's typically celebrities, just because it requires a lot of media to kind of like process, and since celebrities are so documented, they're the ones who are usually the primary targets. And as you can see, it's like 96% of content is pornographic, and there's a lot of videos online. Deepfakes are not the only iteration of synthetic media in general. Media manipulation has existed since the advent of both photography or moving images, either entertainment glamorization or stuff like spirit photography, where people claim they could take photos of deceased loved ones. How to communicate into what audience becomes exponentially more complicated in a field of many people communicating across multiple contexts at once. These conditions amplify and extend the already constructed and performative nature of identity, making it a more self-conscious, intentional act. Women and gender non-conforming people especially had to develop strategies for how to selectively present aspects of themselves online to navigate patriarchal norms and gendered expectations, including sexual and verbal harassment. Research questions. How is the integration of deepfake technology into public internet at large extended and amplified how people perform or construct their identities online across multiple platforms and often competing contexts? How are more recent developments in generative AI systems in which images can be generated through text prompts related to deepfakes? And what effect does this capacity to generate an image or video of anything through machine learning have on desire? Case studies, I explored how people on TikTok were using a de-aging filter, primarily transgender men and women. Users would post dual screen reaction videos in which they juxtaposed their unfiltered appearance with what they looked like after applying the filter. I also joined and observed a Discord community called Unstable Diffusion, where people were using generative AI to kind of like, to generate whole cloth images, pornographic images. I primarily focused on the synthetic horrors and the video channels. Primarily synthetic horrors is like what happens when like these generative AIs make mistakes, and kind of like the scary kind of images that kind of like result from those mistakes. Theory, approaching image creation through the lens of two Deleuze's ideas, the virtual, a kind of amorphous soup of conceptual potential that expands and contracts depending on the availability of nodes of connection, for example, between images. Power of the false, using storytelling basically to kind of like how to tell stories so well it becomes real. And Donna Haraway's Cyborg, the illegitimate offspring of militarism and patriarchal capitalism that engages in resistance through ongoing and ever-changing practices of artificial recoupling and mutation. Also, the xenofeminist collective Laboria Cubonics argues that more alienation is needed, not less, and the semiotic mutations afforded by social media platforms towards the goal of engineering them towards social emancipation. Or what Haraway describes as seizing the tools to mark the world that mark them as other. This is an example of the, I don't know how to play this.
Y'all, I'm having a full-on crisis right now. I've never seen this face before as a teenage boy. I've never seen this. I'm a trans guy, but I didn't start transitioning until I was in my mid-20s, so... Is this what I would have looked like if I was able to start on puberty blockers? Is this what I would have looked like as a teenage boy?
So yeah, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Dylan. Too much French philosophy will fry anyone's brain. Next up is Ben Guidry, who will present his short film, Good Neighbors Watch. Also, I've got someone's iPad. Ah.
Hello everyone, my name is Ben Guidry. I made a film for my project called Good Neighbors Watch. It is a narrative short film, duration 36 minutes. I like to think it's like a horror film. It's like a narrative vignette styled where these characters, they're sort of separate stories in a near future America, sort of intertwine as a far-right militia group becomes prominent in their community. What inspired this film is like actual reality of a growing far-right American fascist movement, and also the neighborhoods of Roxborough and Manayunk, which is where I have lived for the past 2 years while coming to Temple. Very, if you're not aware, very white neighborhoods that are undergoing a gentrification right now. They have weird narratives in these areas revolving around like new influx of people, influx of money, but it sort of like speaks to broader narratives around the America and especially suburban communities where we see like influxes of minority peoples, different races, but also like gender minorities, LGBT people of the community. And we see a lot of pushback, a lot of reactionary pushback to these groups. So one style which really influenced this work was analog horror, which is a subgenre on YouTube, very new online subgenre. It's sort of a found footage type, which uses analog media, so like news, fake newscasts, fake commercials, things of that nature to sort of present a horrific narrative. A lot of it is text-based. So on the left, those are actual, like more popular analog horror channels. On the right, this is how I utilize that style through PSA imagery. Yeah. So it's this imagery is this is work or quote from the system, from the government, and at the bottom you see that it's a 2029 time date. Other influences: found footage, horror like Blair Witch Project, VHS, Dash Cam. A lot of these horror films that are using media technologies and the way that we utilize media technologies to tell a narrative, to tell a horror narrative. My work, instead of focusing more on the analog found footage, it focuses more on digital found footage, the use of memes, and digital memes in far right narratives. So a lot of the these are the influences, a lot of theoretical influence. Mythologies by Roland Barthes, very influential in the way that memes or ideas sort of work through cultural artifacts in building new narratives. Stuart Hall's Encoding and Decoding, also very influential. And that sort of culminates in Whitney Phillips and Ryan Milner's work, You Are Here, where they talk about deep mimetic frames, which is basically how memes, both digital memes and sort of memes as ideas, can form ideology, political ideology, reinforce political ideology. This is examples of my use of memes in the work. I used it as inserts to sort of work with the ideologies of the characters. So let me hurry up and show the clip real quick.
Citizens of the New Freedom Republic, in response to recent civil unrest, the Supreme Administration is calling for all like-minded citizens to uphold your new Constitution. May God bless your patriotism.
I'm just going to say something while it's sort of quiet. I also use narratives of crime and urban decay through montage imagery and like the mimetic inserts like I mentioned earlier. All right, we could cut it there. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Ben. And now Danny Vagnoni will present his creative work, Future Ghosts, Loneliness, Love, and Future in an Era of Permanent Crisis.
Hello, everyone. So I'm going to try and speed through this to get to the documentary as soon as possible. But I did a documentary on loneliness, love, and future in an era of permanent crisis. And my concept for this piece actually came from a book written by Anne Allison called Precarious Japan. And in this book, she talks about two classes of people. One, hikikomori, who are basically people who refuse to leave the rooms under any circumstances. It's an extreme form of social alienation. But she also talks about a more, or a less extreme version, which is haken, which is the precarious proletariat or the precariat. And we have that here in the form of like Grubhub workers, gig workers, and stuff of that variety. And basically, I identified a cohort of 18 to 30-year-olds that they've basically been failed by institutions. They don't really imagine a future for themselves. They're alienated from the world and from themselves. And they've also been subject to two of the worst crises in their coming of age years that we've experienced in the past century, since like the Great Depression, and that is the Great Recession and COVID. And these are the first generations to have worse prospects than their parents in, again, probably since the Great Depression. And these crises also undermine their faith in institutions through the Bush, Obama, and even Bush, Trump years, and even the Obama years. We find that young adults are less faithful in their institutions to actually build a future that they can believe in. And this is compounded by factors like climate change, COVID, again, the possibility that something like that might happen again, nuclear war, stuff like that. Alienation and no future. So despite my focus on loneliness, this is really a core concept of the series, and it is intended to be a documentary series. People feel alienated from themselves, they're not fulfilled. They feel alienated from each other, they're lonely with no fulfilling connections, or fewer fulfilling connections, and they are alienated from the world. There's no greater relationship with a community outside of themselves. So I also take a lot from Naomi Klein's The Shock Doctrine, which describes a state of capitalism where in crisis, which I identify as a permanent state in the Western world and in fact the global community at this point, the government uses the crisis and people's disorientation to privatize public institutions and move wealth away from the public sector. And this creates a state where people are unable to find themselves secure in a future. So they're unable to, say, move out from their parents, have children. And in some cases, these may be, especially in the case of having children, these may be personal choices and an opening up of lifestyle choices. But I have found that this is more an imposed reality. So people aren't financially stable enough to have children. For instance, climate change encourages people to not have children because they don't see a future. And so I had actually I had six interview subjects, but I only ended up using 3. So Kyle was a 29-year-old white male, also a friend of mine. He talks a lot about feeling alienated from the world. He was unable to find a job after college and had to move back in with his parents into his late 20s, and this has prevented him from achieving life milestones. I talked to Nicole, who is an Asian American woman. She's 20, current student of Temple, and she talks a lot about how social media affected her perception of the world and FOMO. And I tried to navigate that social media conversation not in the think piece that's published in the New York Times every 2 weeks, but in a way that talks about how social media is alienating because it is effectively, you're putting your image into a box controlled by a corporation. It's not really an expression of yourself. And then I talked to Diana, who is a Dominican immigrant in her mid-20s. She had a severe depressive phase during lockdown, and she talks about how immigration and that kind of intersectionality affected her experience of loneliness. And just the last thing I want to say before getting into the actual documentary is that literally yesterday, the Surgeon General of the US declared loneliness either crisis or epidemic levels. So yes. Do we still have time to watch? Real fast. Okay, real fast. It's a separate file on the computer. Oh, can I navigate with this? Oh, okay. Can we start from 2:30? There are mentions of suicide, so just be aware of that. These tensions will be expressed through the lives of real individuals living in the world today, and a greater history of what brought us to this bizarre, frightening moment.
My name is Kyle Pierce. I am 29 years old. I studied metals and jewelry. I enjoy painting, drawing, reading books. I'm a rock climber. I enjoy health, fitness, longevity, and spirituality. I suppose I define loneliness as a feeling of alienation or separation from other people or from the world at large, from a greater connection with other people or everything.
My name is Nicole. I'm a sophomore flute performance major at Temple. I've been a musician for 10 years. Oh my God, 10 years now. And I feel like a huge part of loneliness is having FOMO and seeing people do stuff that you want to do and being like, why can't I be like them? Or why can't I just be with other people? A lot of my childhood was seeing everyone be closer to one another because I got to hang out with each other in a different context other than school, and then there was just me where like you only see me in school and nowhere else.
My name is Diana Garcia and I'm a senior here at Klein. My major is advertising and I took a 2-year break. I was originally class of 2021, but I just was going through some mental health stuff due to COVID.
All right, we're good.
And I just needed to
Hello, my name is Zach Gill. I chose to do comprehensive exams for my final project. My areas of examination were research methods, media theory, and the effects of media on the Black community. In the research methods portion of my exam, some topics of discussion were the difference between the social scientific paradigm and the interpretive paradigm. I examined the topic of social media's effects on children. I created 2 potential research questions that could help better understand this issue. The 2 questions that I chose were, how does social media's usage affect the mental health of children, and what are the key factors that contribute to these effects? The next question that I chose was, how do parents and educators' viewpoints of social media usage impact their children or students' social media habits and mental health? The next portion of my exams was the media theory section. In this section, I talked about technological determinism and the term "the medium is the message." I also discussed corporate visions of techno-future and how they are sold to the public via media. And the last area of my examination was the effects of media on the Black community. In this portion, some topics that I discussed was mass media, how it's defined by different scholars. I talked about how mass media has shaped the perception of the Black community through history. And lastly, I talked about how social media plays a role and how the Black community is perceived throughout America. Thank you. I hope you enjoy it.
I'm sorry I couldn't be with you all there today in person, but I'm excited to have the time and the space now to share my project with you all. Thank you to my committee members and all my project collaborators for your help and support. I named my project a Sankofa story because the term Sankofa originates from Ghana, which means to go back and get it. But also, it is not taboo to go back and get what's at risk of being lost, forgotten, or left behind due to time, while we still have things to learn from previous generations. I see this concept often in our popular culture with our constant reworkings, reimaginings, and retrievals of previous narratives in our modern day storytelling. I studied this through reference points, adapted media, and sampled media to see how these all equate to a remix of an original story. And when you take this established narrative, what else do you have to say with your current iteration? What power do you have in your choices? And how does these impact our sense of cultural formation and identity formation? I used music video because the form of a music video has proven to provide space for showing authenticity to a genre and to a craft by an artist, but also providing proper representation to artists who may have not had that agency to do so in the past. I look to interactivity to provide a sense of context and also accreditation to my own past inspirations. I used Afrofuturism as a guiding principle since Afrofuturism provides space for conversations between the past, present, and future generations within our arts and technologies, while fronting the preservation, endurance, and protection of African American identity and culture. This music video was made in tandem with the musical From August with Love from playwright and producer B.K. Fulton. The song Come With Me is featured in the music video written by B.K. Fulton and the main performer, Dr. Yewande Austin. Both the music video and the musical originate from the true story of August Wilson, the 20th century playwright who's known for plays such as Fences, Mount Rainey's Black Bottom, and Two Trains Running, who, in his early years, fell in love with a waitress named Pat Coleman, who then inspired his later works. Here is my reference page, and I hope you enjoy. Thank you.
So many fish in the sea. I didn't understand the meaning of love. I was young and free, like the stars up above. You are my life, my shining star. I wanna be wherever you are. Just take my hand and I'll be there. We've got the world right in our hands. Oh, baby, come with me. I need you, come with me. I see you, come with me. 'Cause I believe that you are all I need. Come with me, I love you, come with me. I adore you, come with me. 'Cause I believe that we can do anything. Do you want a house? I will build it for you. You say you want a car, I will be your wheels. Let me be your morning, noon, and evening. I promise I will give all you ever need. Oh, baby, come with me. I need you, come with me. I see you, come with me. 'Cause I believe that you are all I need. Come with me, I love you, come with me. I adore you, come with me. 'Cause I believe that we can do whatever comes. Just take my hand in